Hey YouTube, wanted to make a quick video about my Odyssey of a 2006 Trailblazer. This was getting a P0171 code, which is lean bank 1. And if you check a lot of the online videos, it says check for an air leak. I'll tell you what I did so you can either make the same mistakes I did or at least learn from what I went through. So with the P0171, it can be caused by various things. Since this is a new Trailblazer to the family, it's actually my sister-in-law's, I went through some real rudimentary steps. I replaced the mass airflow sensor and I replaced the upstream oxygen sensor. They were relatively inexpensive parts and they were both off-brand. So I figured either way it'd be good maintenance to get new Delphi parts in the vehicle. It did not clear the P0171 error after doing those two things. After those two items, being the mass airflow sensor and the oxygen sensor, I ran a can of Chevron Techron, just seeing if it was the fuel injectors, and I cleaned the throttle body. It was already pretty clean. Somebody had already replaced the throttle body before. I cleaned that all up and ran it, and it didn't help at all. So getting the P0171 and the rough idle was getting worse. So that didn't work out. One other thing to identify if you're looking at this, lean bank 1 problem on the Trailblazer, one of the conditions could possibly be low fuel pressure. And although the car ran great on the highway and anything, I didn't think it was fuel pressure. Before I decided to do the manifold gasket, I did take it down to AutoZone. I was able to rent a pressure sensor, at least for the 2006 Trailblazers. If you come over here, and it's right behind this AC rail, and there's that little black cap right there. I'll try to use that little black cap right here. Again, it's right behind the left side of the alternator, the passenger side of the alternator, and right behind the AC rail that crosses the engine compartment. That little black cap there. I managed to rent the pressure sensor, for the pressure gauge from AutoZone. I just did it right there in their parking lot. They had a fitting and it was perfectly at 60 PSI. So that's one way I ruled out. But here's where that tap-in point is for the pressure. Also, if you want to do some fuel injection cleaning, I guess you would do it there also. So credit Eric, the car guy. What I did trying to find the airflow leak, I had a homemade little smoke test kit for an intake system. And I tried that, but I couldn't find any leak. So I got a little more desperate, and Eric, the car guy, showed me how to try to find a air intake leak. So the method to find a intake leak was to spray some carb cleaner or throttle body cleaner around the intake to see if you can find it. So I sprayed it around the the air filter and the whole hosing up to the throttle body. The throttle body itself, no luck, no changes. However, when I got to spraying, I realized the car is apart now, but over top of the throttle body, when I went back closer to the firewall and sprayed the carb cleaner in this area here, I could hear the truck rev up a little bit and sputter a little bit and change RPM. So I knew I had a leak back here in the air intake housing. If I had to do it again, I think before I jumped to the conclusion of of an air intake problem and just jumping to replace the intake manifold, I think what I would have done first is try to tighten down all of the bolts of the air intake manifold and hope that that was the problem. The bolts were very, very easy to turn out when I was taking it apart once I actually got a wrench on them. And I think perhaps, just perhaps, if I would have tightened them all up, I might have been able to clear the P0171 code. Taking a recommendation from some other YouTuber, I'm going to go ahead and put some Loctite, some blue Loctite on these bolts when I put them back in. So this is obviously the air intake, which I've taken out of the car. And let me tell you, if I would have known how difficult this was going to be, I don't think I would have taken it on trying to help somebody out. I would have sent them to the dealer. So let me go over a couple things that may help you. As others have mentioned on the internet, there are actually 10 bolts you need to remove. It's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 for a total of 10. And this last bolt on this side, it's oriented correctly, is closest to the firewall. It's a real son of a gun to get to. Okay, to get the fuel pressure line disconnected, you got to pop off this little saddle right here. You just use a screwdriver and pop it off. It'll easily come off in your hand. But once that's done, the fuel pressure line's still connected. I went to AutoZone and rented a fuel pressure line or line disconnect tool. It's a little separator. You put it over the pipe, and then you press it in, and it will release essentially the locking collar. Then you can push the pipe in and pull it back, and it will come right off. It must have taken me 20 seconds. It was very straightforward. So it's kind of like a shark bite if you're ever using one for your home. For plumbing purposes, same thing. It's just for the gas line here. Hope that helps. Last bolt off closest to the firewall. I actually have one of these little 1/4-inch drive flex connectors, and it was invaluable because you got to go in and around the corner. And using my two hands, I could reach in behind it, position the socket, hold it, and with my right hand turn the socket. So you may need, I recommend you get one of these 1/4-inch drive flex sockets. Let me give you a couple more tips. To get the one closest to the firewall, essentially what I had to do is I kind of had to lay out some moving blankets. I had to do a Superman over the top of the fender, and I could just reach my left hand back to the firewall and set a socket with my right hand around the back of the firewall. So in the Superman position over the top of the car, with my head towards the glass, I could reach back there and finally get that bolt off. The thing I recommend, maybe this is, command of the obvious, but, instead of trying to use a socket driver to get some of these 10 millimeters out, if you have it mounted to a screwdriver, a nut driver, you actually get much better feel, and you can feel these nuts that are actually embedded in here. And, when it's on the car, you're reaching down and you're fishing blind. I had a lot better feel and had a lot more success using the nut driver than using the socket wrench. So the other thing to be aware of is starting from the grill, 1 set, 2 set, 3, 4. Right in here, this 4th set, there's no PCV in these trucks. So you have this little hose that goes from the upper header to the lower, and this hose is in the way of one of these screws, which is hidden behind here. And this little bastard is brittle. And as you can see, it's got a factory clamp, and it was buried back there under the engine. And I ended up cutting it in half in order to get it out of the way. I spent a lot of time dealing with this little stupid thing. So you're aware that this thing exists. Some people said they can flip this little factory clamp off. I struggled a great deal with that. Again, I ended up cutting the hose off, and I'll just put some vacuum hose, or I'll try to find the actual part when I put it back together. I lost a lot of time on this stupid hose. So just so you're aware it exists, and you're gonna have to get it out of the way in order to get this bolt out right here. A couple more tips. I was cussing General Motors and Chevy. They built this thing like the whole damn truck built around this air intake. There are multiple bus wires running across this thing. The powertrain control modules mounted to it. All the wiring harnesses are right here. And then they have this stupid rack actually mounted in front of this. And down here is this little bolt, which actually is a little lower, and it goes on the block just below this. Well, when this thing is on the truck and all the wiring harnesses are here, that bolt is literally impossible, well, almost impossible to get to. I spent a great deal of time on this too. Some people said they didn't have to remove this powertrain control module, shelf assembly, whatever you want to call it. But I found out, even when I got the throttle body disconnected, I didn't have enough room to pull the throttle body away from the truck and get it out without removing this stupid thing. So I fished like 12 inches with a universal socket, and I finally got this bolt out. I also lost a tremendous amount of time. So again, you need to be aware, it's underneath the 4th bolt set, and it is very, very difficult to get to. Good ideas for you, but trying to be helpful. Once I got the intake completely separated and disconnecting all the stupid little hoses and clamps and clips and every other stupid thing you can't see, I actually got it out, and I couldn't get it over this bar, this AC bar that we're all very familiar with. You may actually see a little bend in this where I had to kind of flex it to actually get the intake manifold out. If you come to the passenger side of the engine, there's actually a bolt down here you can take off, which will let you flex this a little more and will let you get the intake out of the actual under hood of the car. That was another huge pain in the ass. Now that I'm ready to put it back in, of course you're going to need some new gaskets. When I took this intake apart, it was just full of crap oil in there and everything, and oil blow by, and it was obviously leaking. And I cleaned it up with brake fluid, and I did a whole bunch of stuff. So obviously you're going to need some new intake gaskets. And since you got to take the throttle body off, you might as well replace the throttle body gasket also. So you can put it back together with all new parts. Okay, this is after the replacement of the intake. I just wanted to show you how Eric at the car guy showed me how to find an intake leak and the symptoms I found on this 2006 car. I just got some carburetor cleaner, and on the truck, that's all I did was spray it up behind the throttle body. And when I sprayed it in here, you could hear the engine change speed and kind of sputter a little. So that's how I knew I had a leak. And again, when I do it now, here the engine does not change at all. So you can take your your throttle body cleaner or your carburetor cleaner, and you can spray your whole intake looking for leaks. And when you hear the engine change speed, you'll know where your leak is. That's the only way I could find it after I did a smoke test, kind of a half-ass smoke test with a homemade smoke machine. I replaced the sensors. I did all kinds of crazy things, but only spraying the carb cleaner was the way for me to find the leak in the Trailblazer. Some other miscellaneous comments. I have the scan tool attached now. I'm sure all scan tools are different. So the short-term fuel trim now is around 0, 2.3, negative 2.3, and the long-term fuel trim is coming down. Before, the long-term fuel trim was like 27, 28, 30, and the short-term was up 8, 9, 10 different spots. So I know the intake manifold fixed it. The short term's going to 0, which ideally it is 0. Long term is coming down the longer the truck runs. So I know the air intake manifold helped with that bank 1 lean error. Hope that's helpful. So there it is, YouTube. I hope I shared some of my experiences, makes your life a little easier if you have to go through this process. I would recommend, unless you're a dedicated DIY shade tree mechanic, you might want to take this one to the dealer and get a price before you take it on. Okay. Hey, I appreciate your time. Please make any comments. I'm sure I got some people mad. That's okay. Just sharing my thoughts. Thanks. Bye.